Hello, my dear students. How are you all doing today? I welcome all of you to this video class of Class 10 English. And the topic that I have brought for you today is a chapter which is there in your course book, The First Flight. The name of the chapter is From the Diary of Anne Frank. Before I begin the chapter, I'm going to tell you something about the background of this chapter. Basically, From the Diary of Anne Frank is actually an extract which is taken from a very famous book called uh, uh, The Diary of the Young Girl. That's the name of the book. It is basically a diary entry, a diary that Anne Frank wrote in the year from 1939 to 1941 or 42 when she was finally killed. She was a Holocaust victim. So first I will tell you something about the Second World War and Holocaust so that you can understand the background of Anne Frank in a better way. So let us get started. As you know, the Second World War was fought between the two sides. On one side, America, United Kingdom, France, Russia, these countries were there, and they were called the Allies. And on the other side, there were Italy, Germany, Japan. Okay, so we are going to talk about the Second World War in this particular chapter. Anne Frank, she was born in Frankfurt, Germany, and she was a Jewish girl. People who believe in Judaism, they are the ones who are called Jews. The way Hindus believe in Hinduism, people who are Jews by religion, they practice Judaism. Okay, so Anne Frank was a Jewish girl, and Jewish people at that time were considered a threat, were considered a dangerous group of people who should be eliminated as it was as it was held by Adolf Hitler. So when Adolf Hitler rose to power and he became the Chancellor of Germany, at that time what happened? He started butchering, he ordered his army to butcher and kill Jewish people. That led to a ferocious genocide of the Jewish people, and it is believed that in the Second World War, around two-thirds of the German population that comprised of Jewish people was systematically eliminated by the Nazi people, by the Nazi government. So I'm going to tell you something about that kind of Germany, that kind of situation in which Anne Frank was born. Okay, and when Anne Frank was a little girl, her father migrated. Her father's name was Otto Frank, and he migrated to Holland because Germany was increasingly growing hostile to the Jewish people. So in order to escape the atrocities inflicted on the Jewish people, her father settled down in Amsterdam, and later on the family of Anne Frank also went and settled there. For a few years, everything was normal, and on her 12th birthday, Anne Frank was gifted a diary by her father, which she considered a priceless possession. She considered it a very important possession, and later on, she started writing diary entries in that. In this particular chapter, we are going to read about the excerpt, the very interesting incident which Anne Frank has written about. Okay, so we are going to deal with that. Before that, let me take you to the next slide and tell you something about Anne Frank. Okay, so let us move on. Anneliese Marie Anne Frank, who was born on 12th June 1929, was a German-born Jewish girl who wrote while in hiding with her family and four friends in Amsterdam during German occupation of the Netherlands in World War II. Her family had moved to Amsterdam after the Nazis gained power in Germany, but were trapped when the Nazi occupation extended into the Netherlands. As persecutions against the Jewish population increased, the family went into hiding in July 1942 in hidden rooms in her father Otto Frank's office building. After 2 years in hiding, the group was betrayed and the family was captured by the Nazi people. So here, this is a short detail of the life and background of Anneliese Mary Anne Frank, Anne Frank's full name. She was born on 12th June 1929 and she was German. I have given all these details to you, but then remember one thing, she had to migrate to a new country, that is Netherlands, in order to settle down there, in order to escape persecutions. Persecution, action, legal action taken against a particular person or a group of people. Here it refers to the atrocities and the unkind treatment that was meted out to the Jewish people. Okay, so this is the background of Anne Frank. Let us get started with the next part. The group was betrayed and was transported to the concentration camp system, where Anne died of typhus in Bergen-Belsen within days of her sister Margot Frank. Margot Frank was her elder sister. Her father Otto, the only survivor of the group, returned to Amsterdam after the war ended, to find that her diary had been saved. Convinced that it was a unique record, he took action to have it published in English under the name The Diary of a Young Girl. The diary was given to Anne Frank for her 13th birthday and chronicles the events of her life from 12th June 1942, when she was 12 years old, until its original Dutch made into many languages and became one of the world's most widely read books. There have been several films based on this particular book, and even an opera is based on the book. Okay, so this is the work of a very sensitive young girl. Okay, so let me tell you, Anne Frank's family was she lived in Amsterdam. She lived for a couple of years and everything went off well, and she was also going to a Montessori, a kindergarten school, but then the things turned bad. The situation turned very, very dangerous, and a day came when Anne Frank was, her family was captured and she was sent to the concentration camp. The key word is concentration camp. The meaning of the concentration camp is it was a center which was systematically erected or established by the Nazi people, and it meted out a very harsh and inhuman treatment to the Jewish people, who were in a very organized manner tortured in the concentration camp, and gradually they died out of starvation and ill treatment. So that's the meaning of the word concentration camp. She was sent over there and she died in the year 1942. Okay, and she died after Margot Frank. Margot Frank was her elder sister. So her father was the only survivor, and when he came back, please understand this fact, when he came back from the concentration camp back to Amsterdam, he found the diary which was written by this little girl, and he decided to get it published. And that is how this beautiful book, this is a sensitive account, a painful account of a little girl and the atrocities that she went through. It is a saga of a Holocaust victim. Okay, so let us move on to the next part of the chapter, and I will discuss the next part in a suitable manner. In this part, Anne Frank is talking about the reason of writing a diary. Okay, and she says, writing in a diary is really a strange experience for someone like me, not only because I have never written anything before, but also because it seems to me that later on neither I nor anyone else will be interested in the musings means thoughts of a 13-year-old schoolgirl. So this is the reason she feels that why should she write a diary after all? Because no one is going to take interest in that diary. She is after all a 13 years old girl. So who is going to read her diary? Who is going to be interested in the thoughts, musings of a little girl? So this is the idea, and that is why Anne Frank does not want to write the diary initially. Oh well, it doesn't matter, she says later on. I feel like writing and I have an even greater need to get all kinds of things off my chest. So what does Anne Frank say? She says here that it's okay, it doesn't matter, it doesn't make any sense. Even when people are not interested in reading her book, still she would like to read the book. She would like to read that, write that diary entry because she's doing it for herself, for her own pleasure. And then she says, paper, this is an important statement made by Anne Frank. She says, paper has more patience than people. Yes, that is so true. People lose patience, they get angry, they get impatient, they are so rude sometimes, they don't behave in a proper or suitable manner at times. But then paper, when you write something, when you share something in your diary, that diary never retaliates. The diary never answer you back. The diary never misbehaves with you. So that way paper or diary or any part of any kind of book that has more value and that has more patience than people. So I thought of this saying on one of those days when I was feeling a little depressed and was sitting at home with my chin in my hand, bored and listless, wondering whether to stay in or go out. I finally stayed where I was brooding. Yes, paper does have more patience. And then she decided that she was going to write a diary, and she decided to write a diary, and she knew that diary could be her real friend. A diary could make a lot of difference to her style of expression, and that was the reason why she decided that she should write a diary. And she started writing a diary with her daily daily routine. She started off with describing the things which happened in a day or two. So this is how she began writing the diary. And then she says that, let me put it very clearly, since no one will believe that a 13-year-old girl is completely alone in the world. So she started writing diary because she wanted to write the diary. She felt that diary was a close friend of Anne. So she wanted to write diary because of that reason. She wanted to share her feelings with her diary, and she had given a name to her diary. The name that she had given to the diary was Kitty. So Kitty was the name given to her diary, and she started writing. And then she says, the first entry that she has made in the diary, she says that she started writing diary not because she was a lonely child. She was perfectly happy. She had a good family. She had many friends. She went to school. She had friends there. Around 30 friends were there. And then finally what happens? She decides that she should write a diary because there are limits to what you can share with your friends and family members. This is what Anne says in the book. And she says because she wanted to, confide, she wanted to express all her innermost feelings in to someone. So she thought that a diary would be an ideal outlet of her emotions, and she started writing diary. And then she says, I have a family, loving aunts and a good home. No one on surface seemed to have anything except my one true friend. All I think about when I'm with friends is having a good time. I can't bring myself to talk about anything but ordinary, everyday things. We don't seem to be able to get any closer, and that's the problem. Maybe it's my fault that we don't confide in each other. In any case, that's just how things are, and they are not liable to change. This is the reason why Anne Frank says that she is writing the diary. She wants to divulge, she wants to confide in someone or something, and diary comes handy. And then she says, that I don't want to jot down the things the way most people would do, but I want the diary to be my friend, and I'm going to call my friend Kitty. So she has given a name to her friend, and the name that she has given to her friend is Kitty, and that's the name of the diary. That's what she says. Let's move on to the next part. Since no one would understand a word of my stories to Kitty if I were to plunge right in, plunge, jump into something. Okay, so if I were to plunge right in, I would better provide a brief sketch of my life, as much as I dislike doing so. So Anne Frank is giving a short detail of her life. Why? Because she thinks that those who would read her diary, or perhaps her friends, or those who are close to her, if they ever get a chance to read the diary, they should know who she was. So she is giving a short family detail, and she says, "My father, the most adorable father I have ever seen, didn't marry my mother until he was 36 and she was 25. My sister, Margot, was born in Frankfurt in Germany in 1926, and I was born on 12th June 1929. So that's the date of birth of Anne Frank. She's giving her family detail, which is very easy to understand. Her father was 36 years old when he got married to Anne's mother. Okay, and Anne was born in the year 1929. And then Anne says, "I lived in Frankfurt until I was 4. My father emigrated to Holland in 1933. My mother, Edith Hollander Frank, went with him to Holland in September, while Margot and I were sent to her later on. And Margot went in December and I followed in February." And then she says that she was plumped down on the table as a birthday gift for Margot. So she was sent later. What happens? They went to Holland. It was her mother and father who went first, and at that time the children, that is Margot, her elder sister, and Anne herself, they stayed in with their grandmother. And later on, when the things were all right, when her father was nicely settled in Amsterdam, he called for his other family members, and the other family members, that is Anne and Margot, they were sent to Amsterdam. Okay. I started right away at the Montessori Nursery School. I stayed there until I was 6, at which time I started in the first form. In the sixth form, my teacher was Mrs. Coopers, the headmistress. At the end of the year, we were both in tears as we said a heartbreaking farewell. So here she talks about her initial schooling in Amsterdam. She joined a Montessori, a kindergarten, a school, nursery school, and she made friends with her teacher, Mrs. Coopers, who happened to be the headmistress of the school. So when the schooling came to an end, because kindergarten comes to an end very shortly, after a couple of years you are shifted to the next kind of school, that is a primary school. So when this time came, at that time there were tears in both the eyes of the teacher and the student. In the summer of 1941, Grandma fell ill and had to have an operation. So my birthday passed with little celebration. So she could not celebrate her birthday in the year 1941 because of her grandmother's illness. Grandma died in January 1942. No one knows how often I think of her and still love her. This birthday celebration in 1942 was intended to make up for the other, and Grandma's candle was lit along with the rest. Okay, so she talks about the fact that her grandmother died in 1942, and she remembers, she has fond love for her grandmother. She loves and misses her grandmother a lot. That is what she is telling in this part of the story. And on in the what you call year 1942, she celebrated her birthday, and on behalf of her dead grandmother, a candle was lit near her birthday cake. So this is how she remembered and paid respect to her grandmother. Okay. So this is, and then she is talking about a particular date. The date is 20th June 1942. Let us see what happens on that day. Dearest Kitty, the date is 20th June 1942. Our entire class is quaking in its boots. What's the meaning of the word quaking in its boots? They are nervous. They are nervous of something. So what is the class nervous for? There is a reason. The reason is given there. The reason, of course, is the forthcoming meeting in which the teachers decide who will move up to the next form and who will be kept back. So it was the result declaration day. And that being a very, very important day in the life of students and teachers both, that was the reason why the children of that her class, that is Anne's class, they were a little nervous and they were quaking in its boots. That's the meaning of quaking in its boots, to feel nervous, to feel the trepidation, to be a little fearful. That's the meaning. Half the class is making bets. GN and I laugh ourselves silly at two boys behind us, CN and Janice, who have staked their entire holiday savings on their bet. From morning to night, it's you are going to pass. No, I'm not. Yes, you are. No, I'm not. Even G's pleading glances and many angry outbursts can't calm them down. If you ask me, there are so many dummies that about a quarter of the class should be kept back. But teachers are the most unpredictable creatures on earth. So she has made a big statement about teachers, people like me. Okay, so she says that the entire class is very nervous. Why? Because the result is going to be declared. And then she says that children are making bets. So what are they betting? Some of them are saying that they are going to pass, some are saying that they are not going to pass. So this is the kind of discussion, a high spirited discussion which is going on in the class, and everybody has kept his or her fingers crossed. So that is what happens. And then Anne says that if she is given a chance, had she been the class teacher or the teacher of that particular class, what would have happened? She says almost 1/4 of the class would not have passed, would not have been promoted to the next class. Why? Because they are all weak. So in a way, Anne Frank sees the situation very nicely, right? She understands, she knows. What does she know? That some children of her class are not up to the mark, and she has made that keen observation in a very straightforward manner. So this is the character trait of Anne Frank that we learn from this particular section of the story. So let us move on. She talks about herself and she says that she is going to clear it, and so are all other girlfriends. So all the girls of the class, they are going to clear the exam and they will be promoted. This is the idea or anticipation of Anne Frank. But then she says she's afraid. She's a little nervous in maths. Why? Because her maths is weak. So she's not so sure whether she's going to pass that particular exam or not. Okay. I get along pretty well with all my teachers. There are 9 of them, 7 men and 2 women. Mr. Keesing, the old fogey who teaches maths, was annoyed with me for ages because I talked so much, and after several warnings, he assigned me extra homework and essay on the subject, a chatterbox. So what happens? She is not, she is not feeling very comfortable in Mr. Keesing, her maths class. What happens? Mr. Keesing happens to be a formidable sort of person, a person who loves discipline, who loves, a quiet and calm and attentive set of children in his classroom. And because Anne is very talkative, that brings problems for Anne Frank. And what happens to her? She is at times scolded by Mr. Keesing because she keeps on talking in the class while the teacher is trying to teach. So a day comes when Mr. Keesing gets very angry, and what does he do? He asks her to write an essay. The topic of the essay is a chatterbox, a chatterbox. This is very interesting. Remember, you will never get an essay from a maths teacher, but here a maths teacher is assigning an English work to Anne Frank. So that is something so very interesting. So let us see what happens after that. I'm reading from the book. What can you write about that? A chatterbox? I would rather worry about that later, I decided. I jotted down the title in my notebook, tucked it in my bag, and tried to keep quiet. That evening, after I had finished the rest of my homework, the note from the essay caught my eye. I began thinking about the subject. while chewing the tip of my fountain pen. Anyone could ramble on, and then she talks about the what should she write in that essay, and then she thinks that she is going to make a good job of it. Why? Because she has been assigned this essay by a maths teacher. She wants to do well. She wants to tell the teacher why it was important for her to at times speak in the class. Because whenever a child speaks, you are also children, you are also school children, so you must be knowing that every time that you speak, it is not that you want to disturb the class. There are sometimes some important queries or questions or clarifications that you want to ask from your friends, or that you want to ask from your teacher. So that way, speaking should not be banned. That's what Anne feels. She feels that sometimes children should be allowed to speak, to, vent out their expressions, vent out their experience, vent out their feelings. So that is something which is required. That is why she comes up with convincing arguments to the necessity of talking. And she thought, and she suddenly had an idea. And then she wrote the essay. This essay went on for 3 pages. Okay. Let us see what happens. What has she written in that essay? Let us find out that. So she wrote an essay entitled, she wrote the essay, and in that essay she had written about her need to talk. And then Mr. Keesing, somehow he got impressed, and he understood that it was required that children should talk sometimes in the class. So he laughed out loud and he forgave her the first time. The second time, what happened? She was again caught for talking in the maths class, and this time the teacher got very angry, and she was assigned another essay, another essay to write on her talkative behavior. And this time again she wrote another essay, and then again she was caught. Right? So this is what happens. I'm just explaining the meaning of this part of the book. I'm not reading the lines one by one. So this time what happened? Anne was given, the teacher got very angry, lost his patience, and he shouted at her and told her that this time you are going to write a third essay, and the topic of that third essay would be quack quack quack, said Mistress Chatterbox. Okay, and when she wrote this, she came up with an idea, and she said that okay, fine, she will write this essay, and she took the help of her friend, and instead of writing an essay, she wrote a poem. Okay, and in that poem she described the family of a swan and a duck, and there were 3 ducklings, and these ducklings, the father was a swan, and the ducklings are ultimately killed they are bitten to death by the swan, the father. Why? Because they quacked a lot. Okay, so this is what she wrote about in her third and final essay that Mr. Keesing had asked her to write. She knew that Mr. Keesing could get angry as a result of what she had written, because in a way she was blaming Mr. Keesing for, stifling her freedom of speech, stifling her freedom of articulation of her thoughts and ideas. So that is what she had in an indirect way done through the poetry. But then she decided that the poem should be handed over to Mr. Keesing the next day, and she did just that. And when Mr. Keesing got this, poem, he read it, and he was a little serious at first, and then he burst out laughing because of the quirky way, the funny way in which the poem had been written. So ultimately he surrendered, and he understood that Anne would always talk, because Anne, in her previous, the first essay that she had written, she had told about the need to talk, and she also had mentioned in the first essay that this was a habit which ran in her family. Her mother was a talkative person, and her sister was also just the same. So as such, belonging from such a family, she could not help but be talkative. So this was a very funny reason that she had given for her talkative behavior. And in the third essay, which she converted into a poem, she has spoken about the brutality of Father Swan, which ultimately resulted in the killing of the three ducklings. So this is how Anne tells the maths teacher the importance of speaking and talking in the class. Yes, of course, it should not lead to disturbance of the class, and if children are speaking quietly, then that becomes understandable, according to Anne Frank. And when this poem was read in the class roared. I had to laugh too, and I had nearly exhausted my ingenuity, cleverness on the topic of chatterboxes. It was time to come up with something else, something original. And now what happens? I'm not going to read all the lines. I have already explained. So here we come to know that Mr. Keesing was trying to play a joke on Anne Frank. With the help of the task, the assignment that he had given to her. But then she wanted to turn the joke on him. This is what she wanted, and that is why she ended up writing a beautiful poem. I'm going to call it a beautiful poem. I don't know what you people are going to think about, but then she wrote a wonderful poem on three ducklings and the harsh treatment which was meted out to them by their father. Okay, and Mr. Keesing, he became very friendly after that, and ultimately what happens, he read the poem to the class, adding his own comments, and to several other classes as well. So these are the things which happens in the chapter. And then from that day onwards, he forgave Anne forever. So whenever she spoke in the class or talked in the class, he did not mind at all, and he became a little more friendly. He became a little more friendly, and he was now on a good rapport. He developed a good rapport with his students. So this is what we learn from this particular extract from the book, The Diary of a Young Girl. Okay, it is very important for children to have an interesting interaction from time to time. They are not going to be deaf and dumb students throughout the day. We cannot expect our children to lie silent, to remain silent in the classroom. They need healthy and interesting interaction to learn and to stay lively during the day in their classroom. So that is what we learned from the story of Anne Frank. Okay. Now moving on, I have already given you the assignment. I want you people to complete those questions. I have given the assignments already. Okay. So this is it. Bye my dear children. Take care, and I will be back with the next topic shortly. Thank you. Have a nice day. हुआ भी है